What the Crown did here has got to be a severe breach of that promise made in 1840, that they will protect Taonga. And Taonga has got nothing to do with the material wealth that the translations purport it to mean. Nothing whatsoever. Taonga are the things that he gave us. He gave us a taniwha to create that, and we abused it. And we suffer the consequences.
Never did I ever think that I'd see the deterioration in such a short time of a place, of a resource, of a people, really. Never.
Tautau ana tua hia te tangi a ngā manua lehu e karanga nei. Tuia. Tuia I runga, tuia I raro, tuia I roto, tuia I wā. Tuia I te kāhui tangata ki te hono I wairua. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te pō. Ki te tūpei pō, ki te tūpei hao. Kāo, kāwatea. Ka tua rehua. Ka rere tūtū mari au ki roto te magarewa tai warawara. Ui ana te reo, waro ana te rongo. Ka hau para whenua mea, māriko ana hine koto. Pū ana ki roto, ke ana ki waho. Ka pū te rūhā, ka hau te rangata I runga ngā mahi ata whai a rehua, ki te whei au, ki te ao marama. Ti hewa Mauri ora. Ti hewa Mauri ora.
Lake Omapere lies at the heart of Taitokero, ancestral territory of the Ngāpui Iwi of Aotearoa. Formed by Mauri from a high-altitude swamp 600 years ago, The lake lies at the edge of the resource-rich Ngāwha thermal field. Fed largely by underground springs, the lake is the source of the Utukura River, which flows through the fertile Utukura Valley and into the upper reaches of the Hokianga Harbour.
Lake Omapere is like the heart of Ngāpuhi. Lake Omapere is the best indicator that reflects the health of the Ngāpuhi people. We've known this for centuries. When Lake Omapere is clean, when Lake Omapere is healthy, then I believe our people will be clean and healthy.
Lake Omapere was once known as the food basket of Ngāpuhi due to its extraordinary abundance of tuna.
Nā, ko te o he kai, o mā pere, kai mā pere, nā, ko te puku, ko te taha unahira, ko te taha orekau he tapu, ko te tani whane, ko e te rā ngā kai, mā pere. Nā, ko e te taka i hua ngai o mā pere. Kai mā pere, te taniwha, tā kauere.
About in the 1900s, there used to be old Mauri villages all on the western shore there. They used to all camp along here, even I did when I was little. When this was all fresh, all this water, just go swimming, all that sort of stuff. It was fun. Just go eeling too. Not that much tuna running these days. If you take it back, you'll find some large tuna in groups, sort of thing. Yeah, they all used to run.
Are they still here, those large tuna?
You'll very rarely find them these days. Yeah, your average size would have been about a 30-pounder back in those days, about in the 1900s. 30-pound tuna.
So important was Lake Omapere to Ngāpuhi that its chiefs were buried on its shores in the sacred mountain Putahi.
This is where they bring the dead across on the canoes and they set the dead upon the rock to decompose. We call it piro. That's the word piro nui. So there's a lot of rotting that takes place. Now, after they have rotted, the bones themselves are carried up into the mountain to Putahi. Ko te putahitanga o Tewi o Ngāpuhi, te putahitanga. The gathering of the chiefs of Ngāpuhi, and they're put into the crater from the top, and the lesser ones are buried on the sides of it. There's openings on the side where they're interred into there.
The lake was a much contended resource, many battles being fought along its shores amongst Ngāpuhi themselves, and later between Ngāpuhi and the British.
This is the site that you're looking at down here onto your right-hand side of the pa that Honey Hickey built to fight the British, which was the first battle that was had between the Maoris and the British in New Zealand. So it's quite a historical site. That pa there was called Tika Hika. If you look round to your left, you can see a rise in the hills over there. That is the site where the British formed their camp from and attacked Honey Hickey's pa. The pa is now dissected by the State Highway 1 because it runs right through the middle of the old pa.
Lake Lake Omapere is being choked by toxic weeds, and a Maori Affairs Select Committee says it's time the government put up the money to save it.
Lake Omapere is a taonga to Ngāpuhi iwi, but it's a treasure that's dying. This weed is choking the life out of the lake.
We feel that if Lake Omapere falls, then Ngāpuhi will fall as well, which is why we're so keen to maintain its good health and to return it to good health.
The place stunk and everything just went, and the winds came and blew all the weeds up on shore, but you could walk, it's like walking on here, like this, on that weed, and you go right out there, walking on the weed.
For us down Utukura, because it's the only outlet that we have, so whatever comes out of the lake runs into our river and then into the harbour. 84, the lake turned bad. The Utukura River was our survival. It provided us water for both things, drinking and washing and recreation. It provided kai, like the whitebait, the tuna, the kanai. Since 84, it does not provide that anymore. So that takes the whole of a hapu and a iwi and a whānau out. Maori have always got this kōrero. Without water, you have no life.
There was froth 2 feet thick, it was brown, you could smell it, and that was the water that those people were expected to use for their farm and personal uses.
Oh, kaore no he oranga, I anga mai te roto. Te mea ko paihana te roto, ko re taia, te tiki wai atu hawa hei boto mahinga kai, ko re taia. Re kau ke he oranga ia e nena, he paihana ka pāna.
And then it came right 13 years later, and we were drinking the water again. We drank it again. And then it collapsed again this time, but it's left all this algae. And, well, we still eat what's in there, but it's hearing what's happening in the harbour. It's upsetting.
I was out there one day actually fishing, and I pulled in my net, and when I brought it back to clean out the fish, it stunk. The stink was something you can't imagine, mate. So it was then that we knew that there was something wrong with the harbour, you know.
Lake Omapere is currently the most toxic it has ever been. We know it's full of toxic algae. Effectively, the lake is poison, literally poison.
These algae, particularly the blue-green algae, they don't originate in lakes. They finish up in lakes and die. And when they die, in the process of dying, they produce potassium cyanide. And potassium cyanide is what Hitler used to kill off his wayward generals.
Who knows what the build-up of this kind of toxin in your system over time, the damage it's going to do. I've heard people say that, they're going to have chronic liver and kidney damage coming up in our kids really young.
Lake quality's poor, and it's been that way for basically ever since we've been doing the project.
Which has been how long?
2.5 years. It isn't really a case of it's good in summer, it's bad in winter. It is bad all the time, and the recommendation is that people don't use it for drinking or stock water.
We do know the lake levels have been lowered. We do know the bush has been stripped off. We do know that it's been over-fertilised, and all of those fertilisers are in the lake because you can actually read those levels. And we know now that is, a big part of what's created what's now, the toxic cesspool that poisons everything else that, everything that flows out of there is poisonous. Utukura gets the worst of it, where it first comes out.
Whakarongoru te maunga Utukura te hoa Te honi te hapu I roto hoki anga e whakarongo rua te maunga. Uta kura te awa, te honi honi te hapu, I roto hoki anga e.
Life for us in general has been disturbing for 160 years.
Yeah.
We learn to cope.
Nobody likes bringing their kids back here anymore.
Yeah.
Well, one of the attractions of bringing kids back here to the marae was you could send lots of kids to the river and know they'd be safe. Now you can't. No one wants to come here anymore because we can't attract them down here to go swimming anymore because they just sit around. And we have to travel to the beaches now. How bad's that when our marae's considering putting in a swimming pool when the river's just down the hill? That's bad.
And we can't even get the water supply, even if we didn't. It's there, but we can't use it. You know, this is really a downward solution to all our problems. What we need is fix that water, for goodness sake. But like I said, you know, as long as it's there, there's money for some people.
It's like any society, eh? Like, you know, when the rivers have gone stagnant, so does the life all along the banks of those rivers, eh? I mean, Russia's a real good example of that. The poison whole cities. And you see the end result, eh? That everyone's health suffers. We're no different here. When that river there gets all murky and unusable, you actually go elsewhere. And that's what it forces you to do.
This place was green, green, green. And everybody had gardens. And it was beautiful. Now, you drive past the home and they're pulling the curtains aside to see who the hell you are. And close the curtains and you know straight away they don't want you to visit them.
In 1965, when I did a better research, 1965, there was 2,500 people in this valley. That's a lot of people. Now, I don't think there'd be many more than, say, 60 to 80 people. Our gardens used to be on average, easy 2 to 4 acre gardens. They were huge. The piles of kumaras, potatoes, they were the size of an average size double garage. That's how big the piles were. Families used to go down with the trailer load and nobody was there to count to see if you took your share. People just loaded up and went home.
And where we're standing here and where we look down onto the harbour to Araituru, to Niua on the sandhills, the Hokianga Harbour, and if the mist wasn't there, you'd be looking up to the upper reaches of the harbour where Mangataniwha is. All of those places were named the first layer of names that humans applied to this land by the ancestor Kupe.
To meet the British demand in the early part of the 19th century for ship masts and seal fur fashion wear, Kororareka, or Russell, became the first port of call in the emerging British colony.
When the Mauri saw what was happening to these thousands upon thousands of seals, when they were being processed in those factories over in Russell, the carcasses were just thrown out into the harbour. And the sight of thousands of carcasses floating in the harbour was a little bit too much for the local people. So they sent for Heke to come and deal to these abusers of Papa Tuanaku, who were abusing the town. They were a food source for the people who lived in that area. But then Heke had a bit of a problem. He couldn't tell a settler from an immigrant, from a missionary, from whatever, because they all looked pretty much the same to him, so he took to everybody.
The thing with Augustus Earle was he was an artist. He was a trained professional observer, and he records how the kauri came right to the water's edge, how there was a fringe of puriri all the way around the water's edge, that there were 17 pass sites between Pakenai and Utukura, further up the harbour. So what I have is a vision of a densely occupied area, particularly abundant forests surrounding the Hokianga Harbour, clean rivers and lots of fish.
Yeah, I remember my dad telling the stories about when he was very much involved in the logging industry and as the raft person in the 1920s. And his recollection of the harbour was 200 to 300 feet trees, you know, on the sides of the harbour. Pure blue water, just like the South Island, like the sounds that people love so much now.
One of the first Europeans to see the place, William Colenso, described it when he got there as a paradise, as a living paradise. He said the bird life was so loud that it was deafening. So you can imagine a lake of beautifully clear water. There's kaumātua there now who described swimming in the lake as children, where the lake was, at least 20 feet deep of clear water.
E tino pai anano nā wai o Omapere. E pai mo te kaukau, a hatia mo te inu, e pai ana mo te inu. Ai nei, kua karawa te he. Ai e rā wā, e korero nei au, e hoki atu nāu, e pitu te kautau. Pue tahi pēo koutou i tēnei wā, ka ore noi ki i te roto, ko mau ana kia no ko te kaumātua nei, pansi, i o tō mau wā, i kite he pēhea te āhua o te roto i taua taima. Ko tā koutou i kitei, hoi no ko te roto i tēnei wā. Hei te wā e pai ana te roto, e pai ana te ngā wai o Omapere.
What have we done to take that shining jewel and turn it into a cesspit? Basically, we cleared the land, took all the kauri and all the big trees.
I heard some of the stories that were told to me about my old people, and when they came and cut the trees down, and in lots of ways they were forced into a situation where they, to survive, had to be the ones who actually, in lots of ways, takahia the mana of their tupuna in order to survive. They went into where the puna were, where the trees were, they cut them down, and they were spiritually affected by that. In my family, it happened to my father, to my granny, and that's where I suppose religion began to play an important part in helping the healing of those times.
In 1826, they were heavily into harvesting kauri and getting it into the water for export. Over the next 30, 40 years, the place just went absolutely mad. And the advantage that the Hokianga had, say, over the Kaipara and some of the other areas, even Coromandel, was that the kauri grew very, very close to the water's edge. So it was extremely simple to get in and drop these trees, have them get down into the water and be able to use them from there. By 1870, 1880, we've got a timber mill that's running in Rawene 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It was processing 18 million super feet of just kahikatea a year. So there was mass harvesting of most of the resources that were in here. After the usable timber was removed, the land was burnt. It was burnt for pastoral use, and there were also large parts of it that were effectively strip mined to get the kauri out. So that's a lot of soil being loosened up over time, and that's really when probably the primary period for erosion and all that sort of stuff started to occur.
I know here, when I first come here, 30 odd years ago, there'd be a foot of sawdust out here, and that's all. Yeah, oh, there's a wee bit there still. Foot of sawdust, from when the old mills were here. Yeah, see, there's a wee bit there.
We can understand what happened in Hokianga. We had a whole lot of people who came from England and settled in a place like Kohukohu, which was once the biggest town in this country, and primarily the aim of that was to actually come and break in the land, as they used to say. You know, we're coming to break in this land. So what they actually did was cut down the trees. They started the very subsistence type of farming where they burnt whole areas and turned them into grassland. So we saw the degrade of the harbour come as a result of that. The silting, the washing down of the mud from the farms into the harbour, and as a result, you know, we've got a situation now where we've got all these big mud banks that people think we're here all the time, but in actual fact have come as a result of those farming practices.
These huge forests, under British colonists' destructive control, were continually ravaged. Then the milled forest was set alight, and for months in the summer, millions of hectares of native forest were burnt. Settlers then sowed grass and cleared areas to feed their livestock. Don Felici Vegioli.
There were hundreds, if not thousands, of Maoris digging the Gunn in the round about 14,000 acres of gum fields. That's all now what used to be called the Omapere Maori block.
Although there was a lot of people that came in and stayed different areas of the lake, and they just lived there just for a few days, maybe just a day or so, or just to get as much food as they can from the lake itself. And the side of the river was just thick with flax. So we used to stay there nights on end, you know. And the children are all stuck in this flax, and the houses are made out of sacks. And we're all stuck in there, and a fire in front of us, and we're just all snuggled up in our little camps while the old folks are diverting the eels. You see the eels coming down like this, down the river. And they're all asleep, and yet they're migrating. And they're just rolling down the river as they come out. And they just divert the eels into their little holes on the side of the banks, and then let the others go further down, and then they keep on doing that all night long until it stops. It stops again. And then they just they clean up their eels, and then they parfait them and then smoke them, or do whatever they want with them, or cart them away on horses and take them out to other people who needs them. And they go for miles.
Ia mātou e haere na ki te pia tuna. Ka nui te hanga wehi te haere i te hanga wahine he. Taka he tu koe, nā ko maranga ake te a ko haere pia i ngā tuna, ka mutu ngā pia nā ro te roro. Ngā rotu ngā pia, i roto te awawa. Nā, ko ki te tu koe maranga moena, ko mataku keu i taku mohe hoki e tani whaka i reira. O mataku katau tēnā pētani whaka i te mea. Wāhi wake tukai kone, ko maranga ake ko. Nā, i hanga matakau i tērā, i te ka hohonu i nei au tukai ki roto. Ngaro tukai ki roto te wai, pūkanaka nā ke ana koe i te wai. E ngai ngā pia, haere tu ngaro tu ngā pia, te kaha te hohonu. Nā, ko e rā ngā mea kei roto ngā boundary o te ngā mea ngā Pākehā nei, ngā pāmua ngā Pākehā. Haere moena ngā mea ki roto ngā Waikeri, nā, i reira katahi ka mea te paru ki runga, nā, o pēnei te meni te sponge nei. Haere tu koe wake na koe ina he tō wake, ngauro tu koe ki roto. Nā, tino wehia tau, te haere mā reira, mata koe tau, te haere mā reira.
After a Lake Omapere settler employed Austrian gum diggers to begin lowering the lake by blasting rock at the outlet, Mauri lodged an application with the Maori Land Court to investigate the title of the lake in 1913.
And this provided tension, active tension with the Crown, to the extent that the surveyor notified the Crown that he would withhold the plans from Mauri because that would then frustrate the investigation and hold it up.
Not being able to produce this plan to Judge Aitchison was against the course of justice.
Acting on the advice of Judge John Salmon, that assertion of title was sufficient to assume control of the lake, and under increasing pressure from returned servicemen who had been settled on swamp sections at the edge of the lake, the government went ahead and lowered the lake while the legal decision over ownership was still pending.
If I had money then, I would have taken the government to court, because that work was illegally done. It was sub judice.
In 1929, the case was eventually heard by Judge Aitchison. He looked at the Māori tikanga way of viewing the lake. He looked at the English common law position, and he tried to bring the two together to see where justice lay. Judge Aitchison came to the conclusion that the land comprising the bed of Lake Omapere was Māori owned under the customs and usages of the Māori people.
Time and again you'll see that the farmers on the lake edge are petitioning the council to lower the level of the lake, because every time it floods, not just does the lake expand, but it also becomes a quagmire at the edge. So they were losing big amounts of land to farming every time it flooded or every time the lake level rose of any significance. So they found that, I guess, draining the lake, and then, they'd have another flood, and then they'd drain the lake again, and then, so this was a continuous process.
And it's still going out, it's still receding.
What sort of distance are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about, from now, it's about 60 metres to where it is now, where the water should be. And it's quite a distance. In the 40s, the water was there, because we used to fish from the back step and just throw the line down in it.
Raising the lake is the next right thing that should have happened, because that's how it was in the very beginning. It was higher than what it is. And lowering it is causing all the problems. Because during summer there's hardly any water, and the water is warm, and all the algae grows in warm water. But if we had it higher, algae doesn't grow in cold water.
Because the water's been down so long, the farmers actually think they own the lake bed, which is Ngāpuhi Estate, and they're fertilising that lake bed, so all that lake bed's getting fertilised. So I see now, to make the lake a nice sustainable thing again, or lake again, it's got to come back up 4.5, 5 metres, so these farmers have got to lose that land, and they've had it long enough, they've had free grazing of it for long enough, so it's time to put the lake back up, and then to bring in your wakahamas, your regattas, your Ironman, your round the lake races and that sort of thing. That's better for Ngāpuhi and Kaikoai than having a big puddle of tūtai out there at the moment, and prisons being built to house these young fellas that should be tour guides. hey, not criminals.
Oh, about a year ago, I went to a public meeting where a Niwa person spoke, and they said the lake could be rehabilitated within 5 years. I agree with them, absolutely I agree with them. But we can't even start on rehabilitating the lake until we know what the lake levels are. They've been determined, and and then it's got to be planted, fenced and planted.
The biggest issue is the public rights and ownership to clean waterways that this whole harbour should provide them. And I think that ownership and that right, I think, transcends what the individual property rights of those who own land around the lake are. That's a pretty hard statement to make, and I realise that, but in terms of settling their issue, money can do that. Money can pick them up and take them elsewhere, but you can't put money into here and pick the harbour up and take it elsewhere.
In December 2006, the Northern Regional Council announced that it had commissioned a $35,000 survey of Lake Omapere's legal boundaries in order to help clarify the issue of the lake's level. According to a council spokesman, the survey indicated that the lake's level had not changed since a survey conducted in 1922, 10 months after the government had lowered the lake by 4.5 feet. In 1976, the town of Kaikohe began piping water from Lake Omapere to supplement dwindling reserves of drinking water, and by 1982, commercial eeling in the lake was underway. Water quality began deteriorating noticeably by 1983, as introduced oxygen weed proliferated alarmingly, attracting an estimated 17,000 black swans to graze on the lake. In 1985, the weed beds collapsed.
Kaikohe was getting the water at that time. The water was being pumped from here into the Kaikohe borough. And of course, when the water went stank and all that sort of, they had to close it. They had to stop that, and everybody in Kaikohe, it was a terrible time.
The place where they were taking the water is the place where they bring all the tūpapaku to lie out in the sun, and then take them up to Putai and bury them. So it's a really tapu place.
To me personally, the running of that water through these tapu places is not on. It's against the tikanga Mauri.
Ia mātou e rama tunu ana i roto i ngā wai o te awa uitakura. I tukana mai tētahi kōrero kia mātou, he kōrero tawhito, i tuku mai ki tēnā whakatupuranga, ki tēnā whakatupuranga, ki tēnā whakatupuranga, mō ngā tau onorau ko he pātu. Tēnei mea te kiri kōpuni, ko rātou ngā kaitiaki o te awa me te ana Omapere. Ka ki te koutou i a rātou e takahuri maina i roto i te wai. Ko mutu te tere o ngā tuna. Tukuna atu rātou ki haere, he tuna tapu tino tapu wena. Ka whara tētahi i a koutou, ko haere rātou katoa. Ka ngaro rātou, ko aituatia te awa utakura me te ana Omapere.
Because the eels are the purifiers of water in any sense. That's how the ancestors use eels to keep the water clean. I believe that. But when they take it away by the ton, wow, what you're going to get is dirty water.
The only interest that has been shown by the trust in the tuna is the commercial selling of them. Ton after ton of tuna have financed things like this Chinese grass carp.
our Member of Parliament at that particular time, and I got Neil to come over and have a look because it was starting to worry me. Around the edge of the lake, there were that many swans that it was just like a hen house, where they were paddling around in the shallow areas and on the edge. And I got Neil to come over and have a look, and which he did, and he was quite amazed to see what was happening to it. And that was the first signs of it ever starting to pollute. And at that particular time, we went down to Neil suggested that Moira and I went down to the Akiak swamp and have a look at what they were doing there with grass carp. And Neil had taken it to Parliament suggesting that the carp could be of some use to get rid of the weed here. And unfortunately, some of the carp at that particular time got into the Waikato River, and there was quite a hoo-ha over it, and they decided against the release of any more carp into waterways at that particular time. So it wasn't until later that they got permission to put carp into here.
Niwa. Niwa are the ones who recommended the Chinese carp get put in there. Niwa. And now they're the problem. So Niwa gets funded to fuck up our lake. That's interesting.
After an initial release of silver carp failed to bring the weed under control, lake trustees appealed to the government, hoping they would fund mechanical weed harvesters which had been used successfully overseas to produce compost. However, at a meeting in Whangarei on November the 13th, 2001, trustees were informed that the only option the government would consider was the cheaper option of Chinese grass carp and dicot spray.
There's a recognition that I think at the moment there aren't any indigenous aquatic plants. It's one of the concerns of having the carp in there, that they're basically they're finished eating the weed, and they've got to look, they're hungry, so they're going to feed on something else. So a lot of the studies when the niwa work seems to suggest that the carp won't eat indigenous plants. They don't find them palatable, but obviously, I mean, if they get really hungry, then they're going to eat something.
20 years, $1 million, and the place is now worse than it was before they started. Something's wrong there?
Well, the intention was to get the carp to eat the weed, and then to eliminate the swans.
We're using this marae block. This is probably the only Maori-owned land here, and we've decided to do the riparian planting here because it's the only outlet to the lake. This one is a man-made outlet. The council decided to put straight through so that they can put the bridge on. They've put a rock wall across there to stop the carp from escaping down into the Utukura Valley. So we're planting mainly harakeke and tikoka, all wetland plants. As you can see, it's quite a lot of wetland in here. What we want to do is stop the nutrients from the land flowing into the lake, because that's the problem with the lake now. It's collapsing because of the huge concentration of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphates in the silt, causing algal blooms. And this particular algal bloom is a poisonous one. It produces toxins and it affects the skin, liver, and it's cumulative. So we really want to get rid of it, and it's also affecting the lower catchment area, Utukura River, as well as into the Hokianga Harbour. So so we got to clean this up before we can actually clean the river and have a nice clean harbour, because we regard the rain into the streams, into the lake, down the river, into Hokianga Harbour as all one body of water. You can't treat one without having regard for the others, and that's how Maori used to, that's the whakaaro of Maori, that it's all one body of water that has its own life force, and if you disturb one and do something wrong to it, then it'll affect everything else. So that's what we want to do. This is our source for the Utukura Valley and the Hokianga Harbour. So if we fix this up, we'll fix everything else up.
It's the blood of the land. It's everything. Without it, there'd be no us, no me, no you, no nothing. It is the most important resource.
It's a strong spiritual aspect in Māoritanga, the water, especially running water. I know that I've had the experience of being in that running water. It's a reawakening of your spirit.
It's about cleansing the wairua that's within you. That's your spirit. And that's what you do every day. You wash with water. And you have a look in the Māori world, everything relates to water. Like waiwera, hot water, wairua, 2 parts of water, and way water of life.
Water for humanity is more important than water for sheep or cattle.
We're talking to the fertilizer companies to make sure they do soil testing to put the exact amount of manure that they need onto the land so there's no waste.
Overall, there is excess amount of nitrogen that's being added to our soils. This system enables farmers to quickly assess the condition of their soil and the performance of their plant. And if you have a shallow rooting system, the fertilizer that you put on to the ground can potentially leach out into the subsoil, into our waterways, into the river systems, and into our lakes, such as Lake Omapere.
Nitrogen is a spin-off of oil companies, see? And if they're going to make it instead of the manure companies and things, well, it's and it's a spin-off from them where your nitrogen comes from, and they're not going to kiss it goodnight and that.
I'm motivated by needing to make an income because I have debt and things like that. And so what I'm doing is I'm meshing 2 things together, one of survival and one of land survival, the 2. Whereas some others in the area who've been here and don't have debt or whatever don't need to engage in such intensive farming, thereby they don't put as much pressure on their property.
In the case of Lake Taupo, for instance, nitrogen-based fertilisers that go on today may take up to 80 years to actually reach Lake Taupo, or in this case Lake Omapere, from some distance away. So in the case of Taupo, and possibly Lake Omapere and a lot of our lakes, the water quality will decline before it's going to improve.
These are the so-called icons, the taonga of this country. What have we done to do,
Te mateke, ka homangia te kaonatanga he moni, hei haka tika I te roto, ko ngā tāngata whiwhiana ki te rawa, ko ngā Pākehā no te kaunihera, o te regional, o te conservation, kei a rātou ki ngā moni rakauriro mai nei I te Mauri, hei haka tika I te roto, ka hori rātou ki te haka pou rā moni te mahi te administration, the research, nā rakaupe pā mai nei ki te roto kātia, koe tēnā ko tā rātou nei kaupapa. Mō mātou te iwi Mauri o ngā pui, tō mātou hia, kia ka tika ina te roto. Mō hena tā, mātou, he a te take i pēnei e. Te mea tuatahi, ko ngā tūtai kau. O ngā kaukatoa kei runga te whenua, ina uwai ho te ua, rere tonu te wai ki roto te roto, mai ngā kino katoa kei a papa tuanuku. Nā te mea tuatoru, ko rui e wā rātu maniua, ki runga i ngā whenua, ko rere mai ue tai ki roto te roto. Nā ka pai te tupu o ngā tarutaru e kōrero tia ne. The fertilizer. Nā mā rātou ke haka tika o nei mea, ka taia, kore taia e tāua. Mā koe kōrero te kia koe, mā rātou ke e haka tika. Kia kaua rā wā rātou kau, haere mai ki reira, mahe wā rātou mai, mōria ki kōatu. Ko te ua, te uai ho te ua, me hau te wai ki te roto ka tika. A o nea anei te tika ngā mea ki kino katoa kei roto i te. Nā ka kaha te tupu o te LG, e kōrero te mai e pua wai ni. Kore tai e tau. Te nape a te wā.
Clean is green, green is clean. You cut every tree down and you're right, mate, you know. And I remember my aunties and my uncles saying the same thing. And it was in regards to our whenua in Mangataipa. And they were saying, you know, boy, once upon a time it was clean. And they say, well, what do you mean by clean, Nan? Oh, they cut all the trees down, it was like a lawn. So that was the mindset that had come from people who come from England, you know, with those practices to here. I look at now yet another generation of people, and these are the children of the farmers who've come. And what they've got the machinery now to go through and turn a hill into a flat, to turn a swamp into a beautiful paddock, and it is happening. It's a reality, it is happening, and it has such a detrimental effect on the waterways.
Paraquat and those were, everyone used them, so they would have been used on here, yeah. And they would have been freaked out about the gorse and stuff, so they would have been trying anything.
I don't recall any of our people ever saying something's a pest. There was always a use for something. They don't grow because they're intending to be a pest. They grow because they can. Yeah, it's no pests. And we have to get rid of that kind of mentality. Otherwise, geez. You know, if you're going to think about it like that, then humans are the biggest bloody pest ever to inhabit this damn place, so should we wipe them out? Yeah, I think so, because they're pests.
And here's New Zealand, the greeny country of the world, still continuing to use these chemicals. What does it tell us about our commitment to the future of our environment?
If you introduce a new chemical which has never existed before, and most of the ones I've been talking about, that is true of them, the so-called POPs, the persistent organic pollutants, then when they get into an animal, the animal has no way of dealing with them. It has not evolved some way of dealing with it. That takes millions of years, not just a few years. And the result is that they just simply accumulate.
If we can keep our water clean, it's going to keep our food clean. We know, for example, you know, things like fish, the fish species, concentrate certain chemicals like heavy metals. We sit at the top of the food chain above the fish, so the more fish we eat, so it concentrates in us. To a mother breastfeeding, you know, will concentrate to the baby.
To tell you how bad it is for women in the United States, unless a woman is a vegan or a vegetarian for her life, she will have in her breast milk concentrations so high that if her milk was being carried in containers other than her breast, she wouldn't be allowed to take it across a state line. It's too polluted. Now, that exists. That's not a matter of just sort of thinking, well, maybe, you know, it's not quite so bad. That is how it is, and the people aren't responding to it. That has been known, this breast milk problem, for example, since the 1960s, and nobody's done anything about it.
If people get used to the idea that right now we are not managers of a pristine resource anymore, We're the managers of waste and pollution right now, and we've got to get into that mode.
Commercial exploitation of the Ngāwha thermal field began with mercury mining in the early part of the 20th century, and more recently has seen the building of the controversial Ngāwha prison, expanding geothermal electricity generation and continuing mineral exploration.
Scary as hell, is what it is. Aurora, we know, are still one of the biggest open miners in the world. We also know that they're responsible for lots of environmental damage worldwide. So you've got to toss up, I guess, the economic benefits from the environmental degradation. We're already way down on the side of environmental protection and high up on the side of environmental degradation in the area. Why make it worse?
Where they built that prison used to be years ago a swamp. And further back from there used to be a pa. And when the pa was attacked by the Maoris themselves, these people from that other pa came into the swamp and they sort of committed suicide, is the word. Mostly children, women and children are in that swamp where that prison is built. This is history I'm talking about here. And that's what they believe, why it's sinking now. They've had truckloads and truckloads of concrete in that place. It's all disappeared and the whole building is sinking now. Well, that's another Mauri of that swamp.
What they do with the geothermal plant is they're actually sucking a whole lot of hot water out and then they're re-injecting water back in. I mean, it's to me quite clear that it has an effect on the Mauri of that, You extract the water, you put it through all this, the machinery, with the electricity, and then you pump it back in. It's like, I suppose I can relate that to, a septic tank. It goes in one end and comes out the other end, and it comes out.
But it's all water, isn't it? It goes in as water and it comes out as water. What's the problem?
Well, that's and so that's the view that, and that's a problem we have. I think society has, is that we see it as just water. Mauri is not a thing that you can grab or see or pull out. It's something that's part of why that is the being of that, why it's water, because it has Mauri. When it doesn't have Mauri, well then it becomes like a kore, nothing.
Ngā rākau, te tangata, ngā rākau ko te wai, wēnei mea katoa he Mauri kei roto. Ko te Mauri o Omapere kei roto tona wai. Nā, e pene life-giving force rā hoki, o te oranga tēni o te tangata. Mā te wai, nā koe tēne, it's a motivating force, ki roto taua mera ko te wai. Ngā no te whenua, ngai ko te wai. Koe tēnā te Mauri kei roto o te roto o Omapere, te wai o Omapere.
Most of the little animals that live, fish that live in the water and that, they actually like moving water. In that stagnant pond at Lake Omapere now, the water doesn't move unless it rains. And so before all this green jelly problem they had, there was movement in the lake, which was fresh water came in from an underground source and then it flowed or overflowed down the Utukura River. Now that freshwater source that used to fill the lake has been tapped into.
Do you know if there's been any research done on the reasons for the drop in the water table in Northland?
we've had reports done, you know. It's one of the obvious reasons, of course, is that over the whole of the region there's a far greater water take. And one of the issues in that is there's the acknowledged consents, but there's also the other issues of those who don't require consent to take water, farmers and domestic water supply. And the actual extent of that might not be quite known.
Under no circumstances should the correction of a local situation as a result of government policies and opportunities that have arisen because of the way our statutes have been put in place should rest with the local people to correct. There is a much wider responsibility to correcting that, and I put the issue fairly and squarely back with the government and the Crown. That's their job.
What Mother Nature gave for human being, I believe we have to respect that, accept what Mother Nature gave us.
It's not a sustainable argument to say that Maori people can sustain that connection to land and water on an environment that's compromised.
The resonance from Aotearoa is from the thousands of years of existence with tangata whenua as the indigenous people. Whether it be a fly in your house, whether it's a gecko in your bush, whether it's a bird in the sky, whether it's a fish in the ocean, we must learn to be able to understand that they are superior, that their answers are what indigenous cultures harmonised with.
This place sustained my people for generations and would have continued to do so, the way they managed their resource.
For us as Maori people, we see it as retaining all of the footprints that our ancestors established 1,000 years ago and still recognisable. People are beginning to understand that that land, people, language, the language is the gateway to that person's world, are important things.
Where do the waterways come from? They come from the puna. And, you know, if you look at hoki ngā maharatanga ki ngā koro ngā mātua, e pāna ki ngā puna. Each hapu had their special puna or the waterways that sustained them for food. There were certain waterways that were used when people were sick. Certain puna were used to wash the dead in. So they played a very important role, not only in the physical well-being, but also the spiritual well-being of our people.
Every one of us depends on that water for our drinking, for making our tea, for washing ourselves and everything like that. So you've got to treat that water with a lot of respect. Without it, we're going to die. And if you pollute them, you die a lot quicker. And this is why I said that creek had to be kept clean at all times. No swimming up there, because, you know, human excrement and your body, you know, you wash your body and it runs back down, and this is where we have pumps pumping water up to the school in the Mairi. And these are public places. And we've got to try and maintain that and keep it clean for everybody.
They took around about 18 months for to rake the whole area around this area here. The other thing that really damaged the lake was the sewage. Every iwi throughout the motu went through that same sort of sadness. Not mainly us young people, would be our old people. I heard a story about my great-grandmother. They were building a pipeline just over here to put the thing, and she went down with an axe to try and chop it up. You know, to her, those days, you know, things were sacred. Tūtai wasn't sacred in the taonga. Our vision was to bring the lake back how it was 100 years ago. We put in about 160,000 harakeke cuttings. So we planted the harakeke 3 metres apart, 10 rows plus deep. So you can imagine 13 kilometres around there. So you're looking at something like 130 k's of harakeke if you put it in the line. So it'll get you to Wellington and back again. Well, the lake taught me everything I know. Even with like knowing how to plant it, like I said, there's only 2 things I knew how to grow. One was pine trees, the other one was marijuana. I didn't know anything else about horticulture. What I learned is what I used to go and just, over my time, is just karakia and go to the urupars and just sit there and just talk to them. And it's 3 or 4 days later, something's just happened around the nursery. No matter what issue it is, what thing you're looking after, it always comes first if you really tūturu kai te aki.
Pūtahi me ngā pau e rua ki te rata. Wera maunga koe wēnaka ngā rangatira, ngā kai kōrero mo te roto. Mai rāna te kōrero ngā tūpuna, ko ngā maunga ke o tātou rangatira. Ko rātou ngā kai kōrero, te tātou. Ina kōrero tātou kia rātou, ko hau mai te raha kāro ki roto i a koe, nā rātou. E hara nāu, e hara nāku, nā rātou. E tika tēnei i roto i te kaupapa Mauri. Mea te ono kia rātou, hau pēhea te nui o ngā rawa e puta kia hei haka tika i te roto, e kore taia. Te mea te rā roto he Mauri. Mauri o te iwi Mauri. Ko riro, ngā ringa mā tātou tiki hakohi mai.
I te wai au e rone, mahara nau te wā hako anō e te heonga kau mātu e orana no e pāna āpe nei i tō tātou whanaunga nei. Tēnā ko tō rātu nei whakaaro ki ora te rā wai. Pēnā no te tōku nei ngākau, ko taku hiehia kia ora e rā wai. E mea naho ki hau, tēnā pēr me tūtaki anō ki ngā molehu e pāna ki te roto o Omapere, tēnā ka kōrero i te taha wairu o tērā roto. Tēnā pēr kei kona au e tahionga ora e pā mai i roto tērā hui, pēnā hui ana ngā kaumātua mō Omapere. Hei haka ora i te wairu o te wai, nā koe tērā ko te Mauri ki orai, te Mauri, nā ke hoki atua noi ki te āhuatanga omua.
I whakapapa to that lake. It's intrinsically part of me, therefore I'm responsible for its well-being because it's responsible for mine.
Kaitiakitanga comes out of that thing of acknowledging Earth Mother, who is a spiritual mother to all of us, and then understanding therefore that we don't stand in a position over nature or over the land, we're actually just part of it. And in order for us to basically to have good lives, enjoyable lives and happy lives, and for our children to have happy lives, is to want to contribute back to Mother Nature. So, we have understood that the world can be an abundant place if you look after it.
It's actually brought the community together, because in terms of Māori take, issues, they can actually see that we actually live in this community too. We've lived here all our lives. For me, it's restoring the mana of the people. And especially this sort of work, which hasn't stood here for nearly 200 years. But not only that, it talks about like the preservation of our river out here, and our lakes and our waterways. And hopefully that people can look at this taonga and say, yes, we will one day look after this river, because that's what we're saying to the people. We need to come here and api this river and look after our river, because you've got the likes of Lake Omapere up there, which is polluted, and it's coming down to this harbour, but this harbour was polluted long before that.
We, the people who live here, should take responsibility for their harbour and for the health of it and the welfare and the management of it. It is ours, just like we belong to it, and our lives are governed by it. And even when we don't notice it, we live by the tides here. And at the same time, we're the ones who should be making decisions about what gets taken out of the harbour, because we're the people who live here.
The hapu that belongs to this harbour is ihutai, ne? This is us. And you know what ihutai is? The nose of the tide. As the tide comes in, that's how ihutai got his name. When the tide came in, that's when they got together there, fishing there, on the incoming tide. We have very many versions of how ihutai got its name. But that version, to me, is the proper one, because you're governed by the tides, as we said, and the people of the area were governed by the tides to get their kaihe. So we don't like to see anything happen to our harbour that way. That's our life. Well, that's our life.
We're letting global issues drive local, when in fact the things that work are local, going global later on. You take your method from your backyard, wider, not the other way round.
A lot of families left the valley for employment and opportunities. And when I guess they enjoyed their lives elsewhere. But the only time they actually remember this place is when they're dying. And when they do die, they come back here, and their family members expect a big welcome. And they're disappointed when they don't get one. And they question, why do Māoris have these maraes? What's it all for? Well, one thing's for certain, it's not just for dying occasions. It's also for celebrating life as well. And if you want to make that reconnection to your culture and family, participation is required.
The vision my old people had for here was that the whānau come back here and look after their own land. Live here as a whānau and look after one another. That's how our people used to think. And that I go along with.
And have a clean waterway.
Yes, yeah. But that's it. You have to
grow their own natural vegetables, so they don't get all these strange diseases. We're waiting for that, what do you call it, that chicken flu?
During the Depression, we helped one another. And it was a thing that I missed out terribly, is the unity.
Te nuia taku mahi ki kone ko taku aroho ki te roto. Me waku tupuna, te tai mai konei rātou e pai ana te roto neki. Te haere tangata he ka kino haere te roto neki, so taku mea nui ai neina kia mano te wai neki te tai mai te toru te kau taurāto. I kaukau ai waku moko puna I konei, waku mamātou tamariki I konei, I ki tā mamātou I konei.
Everything is connected to everything else. So it's important that what we do as kaitiaki, as guardians of the waterways of the Hokianga, has an effect on what happens in Te Moana Nui Yakiwa, the Pacific Ocean. It's a question of Mauri. And it's really about sustainability. How do we sustain something in the greatest, purest form?
Nā ko tāku moemoea, kia ōrite ana te wai I roto te roto o Omapere, I tēnei hoki I roto te awa o Kaitoki, kia tae te tangata ngā uri o muri, ki te inui tēnei wai, me te wai hoki o roto o Omapere. Koe ana te moemoea, ā ki tunu atu.